Here we go. Welcome to episode 14 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast, the first conspiracy episode, recorded February 20th, 2019, from a secured location. My name is Ian, and tonight only I've been left in charge. While Eric was researching the tinfoil hat theories we were going to talk about tonight, he was renditioned to Guantanamo Bay by some men in black into an unmarked aircraft. He is to be held until such time as we deny all conspiracies. I live on a small hobby farm on an undisclosed location on the west coast. I may or may not be interested in preparedness. I can neither confirm nor deny that.
I'm Alan, or am I? I'm a rather non-specific security professional with a background in first response, and I've seen some stuff, man. Some stuff that would blow your mind.
You guys have cool intros, and I just have my same lame one. Wow.
Oh, right. Yeah, didn't we tell you about that?
It's all about the prep work, man.
Cool. That's cool. You guys just edited show notes after I did. But no, it's cool. I'm Gavin, business owner, gun owner, hunter, atheist, volunteer, first responder, CCFR field officer for the GTA, instructor with Ragnarok Tactical. And if you want to learn secret squirrel stuff, talk to me. And I'm also a regular panelist on the other CPP, Canadian Patriot podcast.
Not to take it sideways, but are you part of that main secret squirrel club that has like the compass and the ruler thing going on?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I would like to be part of that club. So if there are any Masons listening, just let me know.
I hate to break it to you, but you can't be a Mason if you're an atheist. Just saying.
I'll lie. I'll lie.
Hey, it's our first squirrel moment. We're not even 2 minutes in. Okay. So we have some housekeeping items to attend to. We're going to start off with some news articles relating to preparedness in the outdoors. Next, we will be letting you know how we've improved our preparedness since the last episode. Then we'll get into the main topic for this episode, which is conspiracy theories. It involves basically our favorite tinfoil hat rumors and whether or not we support them or just don't believe in them. So for the news, Alan.
I found a couple of interesting articles. One is actually they're both in BC. Funny enough, a lot of preparedness news comes out of BC. The first one is a link from the CBC, and it is a reference to a measles outbreak at a French language school, where some 33 students and staff have been asked to stay home because they have low vaccination rates, and the government is trying to either reduce an outbreak or control the population. I'll let you decide. The other is actually a couple of articles that are related. This is from Global News, and there were some avalanches and rock slides that have closed some highways, part of the Trans-Canada Highway 97, and perhaps somebody who's from that area can tell me exactly what that means, but it seems like a fairly significant artery through the BC interior that's been closed. That article was showing that they were actually having to blast their way through the road and to open the highway. So it just goes to illustrate that it could be that it's really quick, that you can end up completely isolated and cut off from your support lines.
Yeah, so Highway 97 starts basically in the Okanagan Valley, right at the U.S. border, and goes all the way up past Prince George, and which is right in the dead center of the province, all the way up to Dawson Creek, BC. So it basically bisects the province. So right where it meets the Trans-Canada at the north end of the Okanagan is probably where that happened, I guess. And yeah, it doesn't take much for avalanches around there. It's really steep terrain in the Revelstoke area, that type of thing. Yeah, it's that time of year, right?
So do you think all the vaccines are on the trucks that can't get through the highway? Is that why people aren't giving them to their kids?
Could be.
Well, wasn't that dog sled? Wasn't that how the vaccines were delivered back in the day? I feel like we can still get dog sleds through.
Yeah, interestingly enough, whether or not you're pro or anti-vaccine or whatever, I don't even want to get started with that one. But
come on, it's a conspiracy episode.
But the thing is, okay, so if you are vaccinated, you shouldn't be worried about somebody else infecting you if they're sick. I mean, you should be fine, right? So, I mean, if they work, you shouldn't have to worry about it. And if they don't work, well, then why are you doing it? I don't know. It's one of those things where you
I got in a huge thing on Facebook today about vaccines with some people.
Yeah, I mean, there's no easy answer. They talk about herd mentality and herd healthiness.
Herd immunity.
Herd immunity. Herd mentalities.
Yeah. that too. Yeah,
it's a totally different thing.
Yeah, on both sides of the argument, I think it's a very apt description of the situation.
Oh, and both sides of that discussion are dug right in. And so, I mean, whether or not you can talk about the stuff other than the actual vaccines in, like the adjuvants and everything else, or you can talk about, like you said, Bill Gates' plan to reduce the population through vaccinations, which he's on record saying. I mean, oh, yeah, there's just no end to that argument.
And everybody's right. That's what makes it such a great conspiracy.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but you're worse than Hitler for being on the other side of the argument.
You're worse than Hitler for being on any side of an argument.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
what do you have first in the newsian?
I got a couple there. One, a train carrying crude derails in Manitoba. So it was on the CBC. And interestingly enough, because pipelines are evil, they've been taken to carrying crude oil on trains. And so if the Lac-Mégantic thing couldn't teach us enough, there's another one that derailed in Manitoba here, which is, of course, spilled oil everywhere into a town and so on and so on. And of course, it's going to pollute the water supply and it's going to do all sorts of other stuff. So, I mean, pipelines may have their issues, but I think their accident leak rate is probably a hell of a lot lower than train derailments, which happen weekly. So,
well, and also the whole explosive fire thing where you can't control it when hundreds of cars explode simultaneously.
Yeah, like I think like a pipeline maybe has a very small, consistent leak, whereas like a train doesn't until it does, and then it's really, 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 really bad.
And then probably causes billions in damage and lawsuits, in which case could have bought a whole new pipeline for that.
Yeah, like death and a bunch of stuff, and like 10 times worse than whatever minimal damage is done by the slow, small leak in the middle of nowhere that's not affecting anybody.
And the oil going back into the same ground from whence it came.
Yeah.
But you could talk about the capitalist perspective is like every leak in an oil pipeline is lost revenue for a capitalist. Trust me, they do their best to make sure there's no leaks because they don't want to take it off the bottom line. So, I mean, I would say that the monitoring for leaks is pretty huge. They have small airplanes that go up and down pipelines looking for telltale signs of a leak just to make sure they don't have it, because why lose money?
Absolutely.
And so, I would say that they're probably better monitored than the train system, which is run by humans, which are prone to error.
I mean, look at like when they make alcohol, look at what they go through to minimize evaporation and not have to pay the taxes on that, because that's going to happen. So I imagine it's pretty similar on the oil industry, because every missing milliliter is money out of their pocket. And if they're such, as you said, evil capitalists, they're going to want every single penny out of it.
So just like using every part of the animal to meat plant, they're gonna want to use every bit of that oil for sure. Yeah. So the other article I wanted to cover off was 2 people actually got caught in an avalanche within the normal bounds of a ski hill, and so it was on CBC as well, and it was at Castle Mountain in Calgary. And so even though they were totally skiing where they should be, and they didn't break any boundary issues or anything else, which is usually what happens. They were just minding their own business on the ski hill, got caught in an avalanche. So, I mean, just because you're on a semi-controlled patch of land in the mountains doesn't mean you're safe. So I decided to mention that one as well.
Danger is everywhere. Lurks around every corner.
Yeah.
Did they live? I didn't read the article. Did they live?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the fact is that most skiers nowadays usually either have a locator or have some sort of idea of what to do, but I think it was a pretty minor avalanche overall, but still, I mean,
you always
getting hit by trucks.
I would say, you don't want to see that wall of stone coming down at you no matter what. So anyway, so what have you done lately for preps, which I think takes us to Gavin?
Well, I guess not a whole lot, but I have been getting some course curriculum together for some friends that are traveling overseas to some of those third world countries, if you will. So I'm kind of going through some stuff on how to get them prepared for events like kidnappings or other things that happen when you're in an area you're not familiar with, and you may or may not be able to have some of the stuff that you carry with you on a regular basis. So improvised weapons, medicine, and things like that.
Did you make them watch Taken with Liam Neeson?
No, because that would make them racist, apparently, now.
Okay. And I was going to say, like, maybe one of those LoJack devices, they can get their personal location, something, or maps.me, like we mentioned last week about free offline maps or something for them.
No, first aid app.
Yeah, nothing that fancy. It's all very, very low tech because, what is it? There's a quote somewhere, and I'm going to butcher it horribly now, but I guess the more high tech a system, the more prone it is to primitive attacks.
Fair enough. Yeah, the emergency locator can get smashed pretty easy with a hammer or a rock, for
Yeah.
that matter.
So, the more crazy scientific, tech-based things that people will try to use on you, just smashing it with a rock will be more and more effective. So we try to keep it pretty simple and low tech, because people aren't going to think a whole lot if you have a pen in your pocket. But within a few seconds, you can sharpen that pen on some concrete, and now you've got a very pointy, very deadly thing.
For sure.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. But yeah, like I was saying, that maps.me does not require cell phone coverage or anything else. It's just nice to have the map on your phone.
But it doesn't require a phone.
Yeah, it requires a phone. But I mean, at least if you download the map and you don't have a cell phone plan for that particular country, at least you can like make sure the taxi driver isn't taking you in the wrong direction, or you know what I mean? Like make sure you can double check their work, so to speak.
I usually have one of those little button compasses that I carry with me when I go to weird places like that. That doesn't take up a whole lot of space, but I'm one of those weirdos that does that stuff. So
actually, those
don't go to weird places.
Yeah, I try not to, but I like traveling. And
that button compasses, like, I mean, you get them from like Amazon or whatever, or eBay. But have you found some that are actually fairly decently reliable?
Yeah, the one I have is I'll have to find out where it's from and I'll let you know. But yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, because some of them just sit there and spin, or never do settle on north or anything.
Oh
else,
yeah, no, this is a pretty decent quality one that I know a lot of people that do this kind of stuff. They rely on it, so
that's good.
Yeah, it's not one of those garbage like
dollar stores.
Yeah, like survival compass for a 3-year-old. It doesn't work at all. Great. No, it's not bad.
Cool. Alan?
This week I'm continuing my mission of fitness. Inspired by the podcast challenge of last week and the week before. I've been training every day after being stuck in an office for over a year of 70+ hour weeks. It feels good to be up and moving again. I'm just starting a 27-day stretch of working. I won't have a day off until March 14th, I believe, March 15th. And so my prepping has been mostly meals and meals and laundry, so I don't have to do it through this nasty stretch. In terms of long-term prepping, I've got food, like meals stored away now, long-term storage now for approximately 8 people in the house for a week, which is a month or more for the average occupancy of our house. And hopefully I'm getting close to my goal, which is a goal of a month for full capacity of the house. This week I spent a lot of time practicing knot tying. It's been a while since I've just sat down and tied knots. Reminds me of my first survival mentor, Scouter Jeff. If he's listening, he probably isn't. He was an RCR guy way back in the day when I was in Scouts, and he reminded us that if you can't tie knots, tie lots. And so I've done a few of those. I actually put on my Instagram page, if you care to go find me at PPSWO. Put up a few helpful knots that might get you through if need be.
Have you ever done any sailing, or like how'd you get your start with knots in general? Like just Boy Scouts or?
Yeah, it was literally just through Scouts. Scouter Jeff had this tendency to forget to bring important things when we were going camping. So one time he forgot to bring the tents. He forgot to throw them in the truck. And so if we wanted to be warm, it was a February camp, and if we wanted to be warm, we had to build shelters, and we had to build fire, and we had to build it quickly. And so we drilled on knots, we drilled on ropes, we drilled on how to make nature work in our favor, and that was it. It's been just kind of a hobby of mine since I was 8-9 years old. I can make a figure 8 knot, do whatever I want with it.
It's amazing how handy that kind of thing. Even if you just know like a couple of ones, like if you know a couple of hitches and a couple of bends and this and that, like what you can accomplish with those.
Absolutely.
But
it really doesn't take a lot of knowledge, but a little bit of knowledge that is really, really practical. I remember when I did my Hunter's Ed course, the screen like the projector screen was on one of those stands that's kind of spring loaded and it wasn't sitting right, and so a little bit of paracord that was in my backpack and a couple of adjustable knots, and I was able to keep it square for the weekend while we were watching the videos when I had my PAL and Hunter's Ed courses.
Yeah, paracord is handy because that's one of the things that you need to keep in your secret squirrel kit. Just saying.
If your shoelaces aren't paracord, you do not deserve to be watching this episode right now.
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, now I have to ask you, the question is, did Scouter Jeff really forget the tents?
Oh no, it was 100% on purpose. No question, it was on purpose. We didn't realize it at the time, but it was 100% on purpose. That was if we were given the option of building a shelter from whatever we could find on the ground and piled up snow, or sleeping in tents, we would choose sleeping in tents every time. If we didn't have the choice, we built the shelters, and we built them damn warm because we were kids and we were wusses.
Yeah.
No question, it was 100% on purpose, and I thank him for it. Every single time I go camping, I remember all those lessons of how to build a fire and how to block the wind and how to adjust for the wind and all of those good things.
Kind of like that mean uncle that threw you in the pool to get you to start swimming, but on like more of a larger scale with winter camping.
You'll be fine.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Yeah, you only get hypothermia once. So.
Yeah, did you really need all 10 toes or not? I mean, oh man. So actually, I was gonna say, like, knots again. You could use them for anything, like the reef knot, everything else. But there's the 550 paracord is what I was going to come back to. But definitely buy the spool if you can. If you can save up and just buy a big spool.
Oh yeah.
I find those 100 knot hanks that send you. After the first usage, it ends up like you turn around and it's gone into like this giant ball that you can't undo. So I end up trying to use the spools as often as I can because it's so handy.
Yeah. There's actually a kit you can buy that you can spool your own, and then it even holds a little lighter in this thing, and it's got like a strap cutter so you can cut they're pretty neat.
I have about 17 different colors that I've just collected over the years, and yeah, I take everything apart and I spool it. I've used old fishing line reels and I spool all my paracord on it.
Oh, see, that's just clever then. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I feel bad because I've still got this hank sitting in my suitcase.
Oh yeah, mine is just all balled up.
But I like I said, I still have that book that shows me how to tie 550 cord bracelets, so I have a reason for having it in my suitcase, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah. As for myself, I guess week 3 now, I guess, of the keto diet. I don't know, like my wife's holistic nutritionist as well, so she's kind of behind it. She's okay with the science behind it, and seems to be going well. I haven't really stepped on the scale since, but it seems to be, I feel better. It's certainly working so far.
If you feel better, that's what counts.
Yeah, and I mean the weight gain has stopped, that's for sure. And yearly work medical is happening in March, so I guess I'll know by then for sure officially if there's any results. As far as that, so we're just going through that big snow melt now. So we had that big snowstorm a little while ago, and just trying to get everything, I guess, uncovered. We had a bunch of logs that we'd bucked up before, but they got glued together with the snow. So as they get pulled out of the snow, we've been piling those up as well. We fixed a lot of damage to the bird netting for the chicken coops. So as the heavy snow hit, it's all wet and gross, just falls to the ground, and the chickens can't even get outside the coops. So we had to pull those out and fix all those. Water collection facilities took a hit as well. So not only frozen solid, some of them, but even some of the eaves troughs got destroyed. So we had to fix some of those. Just that wimpy West Coast eaves troughs, right? And see here, we placed some eggs in the incubator to improve our egg production, and we started this year's meat birds. So that allows us to sell some hatching eggs down the road. Once we've got our own taken care of, we can sell day-old chicks or just the fertilized eggs. Carried on with some more reloading, and then made one last trip to the range before my summer vacation ended. Poorly timed summer vacation, and then finished my gas rotation of my jerry cans. So it worked out well. So I got fresh gas all around.
Nice. It's a lot more prepping than either Gavin or I did.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, summer vacation. You guys will actually be having legit summer vacation. I'll be at work, so it all works out in the end.
Yeah, and when stuff goes really sideways, we'll just trek ourselves out to you.
Yeah, that's my plan.
I've heard that before. Yeah. Yeah. As long as you bring like tons of food with you and toys and stuff, it'd be fantastic.
I will bring all the guns.
Excellent.
I have like 4 drones around here and like 17 Nerf guns. How does that work?
Actually, question on drones. Does the Canadian military have any drones? We were actually discussing this the other day with a third party.
I imagine we do, but we've probably bought second or third hand ones, and we're not allowed to whip them out.
Yeah, and show them how big they are or anything else.
Yeah.
Dang.
I would imagine the stuff that they actually want to deploy we don't know about yet.
Yeah.
Because interestingly enough, like I guess from an automation perspective and job loss perspective, that down in the U.S., I guess like a third of the Air Force pilots now are drone pilots. Which theoretically is good because if the drone gets shot down, they can just take over another drone and keep going, right? But you can see down the road there's going to be autonomous ones that the Soviets are already unleashing and everything else. I'm just kind of wondering if we're just being left behind the dust here or what's going on with that.
We don't have any enemies.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that, eventually most frontline combat stuff is going to be some sort of drone, be it little robot people or tanks or whatever are going to be unmanned because no loss of life, right?
The Simpsons called this in like 1994 when Bart and Lisa went to the military academy. They said the wars of the future will not be fought by men; they will be fought by drones, and they will be fought by robots in space or on top of very tall mountains. And your job will be very clear; it will be to maintain and service these robots.
Yeah.
Well, and interestingly enough, I mean, Kalashnikov Company, our AK-47 forefathers there, they just unleashed the first kamikaze drones. They took a page from World War II there, and they've got this small, like, man-sized drone. And basically, its job is to go about half an hour towards the enemy and just dive down with the explosives pretty much vertically and self-destruct. And that's just what their new thing is. And so it's a completely disposable drone.
How do you attack an enemy that doesn't care whether it lives or dies?
And it's coming straight down, so if you shoot at it with the anti-aircraft gun, it's still going to keep coming straight down.
It's still coming straight down at you. Yep.
So anyways, yeah, that was a very interesting article. All right, so time to move on to the main topic of the show. So who has some pet theories they want to discuss? And we can go, like we talked about JFK, faked moon landings, or even much to some of our listeners, is maybe we could discuss the existence of Sasquatch.
I don't think there's any Sasquatch out there. If we ever see me at 5 a.m, then we know that I'm only one step off the missing link. Here's one. It's been going on for a long time. Where are we? 18 years, almost 18 years out now. The big question: does jet fuel melt steel beams? This was a theory that started circulating shortly after the 9/11 terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in New York City. The theory claims that since jet fuel only burns at about 1,500 degrees, it cannot possibly melt the structural steel beams in the World Trade Center because the structural steel beams require about 2,700 degrees of heat to melt. I have 2 points about this. One, the steel did not need to melt in any way, shape, or form. It just needed to lose strength. That starts to happen around 850 degrees. And at 1,100 degrees, it loses 50% of its strength. The weight of the building does the rest. The second point that I have about that is the oven effect. So while the fuel itself may only burn around 1,500, being concentrated in a concrete building builds that heat up much higher and has a lot more time on target, which means that the effects of the heat are significantly greater. I was reading an article about from the National Institute for Steel Construction. So they are the leading subject matter experts in how buildings like that are built and how stable and safe they are. They said that once the consumable materials in the building ignited, such as the curtains, the desks, paper, computers, carpeting, all the stuff inside, it's reasonable to say that pockets of heat achieved heat pockets as high as 1,832 degrees Fahrenheit, which is enough to melt to reduce the strength of the structural steel down to about 10% initial rating. So you couple that with hours and hours of no firefighting, meaning that it's got lots of time on target. You've got all the vertical shafts, including the elevators, service ducts, stairwells, all that stuff, carrying the heat up and down, and there's no There's no question that all of that points to the internal heat caused by, initiated by the jet fuel, is more than enough to bring down those buildings.
Well, and I imagine, I mean, with, you know, the windows being smashed out and everything, there's going to be plenty of oxygen feeding that, plus the added weight of an airplane stuck in the building.
Yep. And then the fact that none of the fire partition, all the fire partition doors were open because people were clamoring out the stairwells. So the doors that are designed to keep the heat isolated into specific pockets are now open, and therefore they're not keeping the heat in specific places.
Yep.
I'm going with it's totally plausible. Exactly the way that we saw it happen on TV.
And so, of course, being contrarian, I had to put in a couple articles just to push your buttons. So, so I said so that doesn't explain Building 7, which had no planes hit it. And of course, you mentioned something about seismic activity then.
Right. Well, I mean, the seismic activity is recorded, right? When the first two towers collapsed, it was like it registered, right? So if you're picture a kitchen table and there's a Jenga set in the middle of the table. Now shake the table. Does the Jenga set fall down? Right? If you shake the table hard enough, the stuff that's on it's going to fall over. Alternately, in that same article that I referenced, the World Trade Center, so WT7, so the number 7 tower, was largely powered or had a lot of backup generators apparently. So one of the main occupants was actually the city of New York. They had their emergency command center there, which was all powered by emergency generators, which were all fueled by significant underground fuel tanks. So because of the jolts and the impacts related to the original attack, there was a resulting fire in the number 7 building because there was no firefighting effort, and because it was fueled by these large fuel tanks that were underground. You had exactly the same effect just over a longer period and without the introduction of the external oxygen. And that's why it also fell down eventually.
And so, of course, I couldn't even find anything that was from a credible source on the whole buildings burning for forever and not collapsing. I think that I got one from collectivevolution.com. And
what about the missing debris in front of the Pentagon?
And the free thought project was another one. So of course, we can go into the Pentagon in a second here, but the interestingly enough, that they had this Chechnya high-rise burn for 29 hours with no collapse. But I mean, and it was totally engulfed in flames head to toe, but probably didn't get as hot, and maybe it was built strong like a Russian bull or something. But
well, it's all about the construction methods too, right? One of the things about the World Trade Center is that it had no interior columns. So it was supported only by the exterior wall and the elevator shafts. There were no interior columns. Yeah, and that was one of the features. It was revolutionary at the time, and that eventually led to the
hindsight, probably a bad idea.
Yeah, maybe not the best idea in the world, right? So when you've got different construction methods, you can't even compare the two buildings. I mean, yes, other buildings have burned for longer and not collapsed, but other buildings have burned for far less time and collapsed under the weight. So. It's not even a fair comparison. That was one of the big things about the World Trade Center. There were no interior vertical columns. Also, fun fact about the World Trade Center: every door in that building, in both towers, one and 2, could be opened by a single key.
Oh, geez, that's a locksmith nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine. I did a case study on it when I was teaching about master keying as a locksmith, and we were talking about how enormously large and complex that system was, because each floor had its own master, and then each unit had its own master within that, and then individual rooms. But one key opened the entire complex.
Well, that's interesting. So yeah, as much as we'd love to joke about the conspiracy theory at 9/11, I mean, we look at a government who can't run a balanced budget, And at the time, the guy who was a few months into a term was supposedly masterminding thing, and he couldn't even get the "Fool Me Once" slogan right.
Yeah. So I just don't think overall. I just don't think that the government of the United States of America is capable of covering up and keeping quiet such a large conspiracy. I just don't think it's possible.
I would agree with you guys, but I certainly think there's a lot of weird things that are still not explained about this whole thing.
Oh,
of course.
Lack of bodies in Philadelphia, lack of debris at the Pentagon, and we go on we could spend everything just on this one conspiracy theory.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, there's whole. I'm sure there's whole podcasts and websites and everything dedicated to it. But like,
there absolutely are. Yep.
But I think it's a kind of a lot like the British and everything with the Enigma machine. Like, maybe they didn't plan it, but they certainly knew that things were happening, and maybe they let it happen in order to enact new regulations or things like that. And even that's maybe a little iffy, but the Homeland Security Act and everything came about after the fact, right?
Well, the Patriot Act got rammed through without anybody reading it. And I mean, the fact is that wouldn't have been the first time in history the U.S. did it either. I mean, look at, they knew Pearl Harbor was coming. They did nothing. Yeah. They knew about the Zimmerman telegram for World War I, and that basically, supposedly Mexico was going to join and start a new front against them, so they had to join the war. And, the Gulf of Tonkin, whether or not that actually happened or not, I mean, they knew something was going on there. It certainly wouldn't be the first or the last time when they knew something was coming and just did nothing. Yeah,
because I'd agree that it's far too big of an event for them to mastermind without somebody talking. But there's definitely some stuff that is jacked up.
Well, but let's take it back to World War II, right? Like, they knew Pearl Harbor was coming. They didn't stop it. What happened as a result of the world going to war is the Depression ended. Right, war is good for business. Yeah, right. So when we're in a period of economic depression, it's not a bad thing to go to war.
And exactly.
It's very good to get people back to work and get people skilled and start moving money around.
The U.S. prior to the Pearl Harbor was making money selling to both sides, but then they figured out they could make more money if they went back to war.
Yep.
And everybody got on board instead of being a bipartisan thing, instead of being a single party thing. And being isolationist, they got bipartisan support, just like the Patriot Act and everything else. And before you know it, they had the whole country behind them, like cranking out manufacturing as fast as they could.
Yeah, and like we said, and
unemployment went from 30% to 3% in a month.
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell me that wasn't if it wasn't planned, that it wasn't allowed.
Yeah. No, exactly. For sure. You had another one you wanted to bring up as well.
Oh, we do. It turns out we do have time for this. Okay. The other one I was going to think of, I was talking about was anytime we hear the term big, I love it. Big pharma. So we were talking about this before the episode, or before we were live. It makes really good fiscal sense for the medical industry to keep us unhealthy. Does the medical, so my tagline in the show notes, does the medical industry really want us healthy? I would say not. A healthy population is not a profitable population. So it's better to have us hooked on medications that make us feel normal than to actually let us feel normal. Physical ailments aside, some of the mood-changing medications that get prescribed are probably the biggest ones. In Canada, we are the third largest consumers in the world of antidepressant medications. Australia is number 2, and Iceland is number 1. I understand Iceland being number 1. It's a population the size of a small town or a small city, and they have nothing other than rocks and darkness.
And it's hard not to date your first cousin.
Exactly.
Yeah. I also noticed something else these places have in common: socialized medicine.
Yeah.
When the drugs are free, the money flows, right?
Well, that's why I was actually surprised the U.S. didn't come in number 1. But then I thought about that, and I was like, oh yeah, it's because people would actually have to pay full price for it.
Pay for it, yeah.
Yeah.
Being a $15 billion industry, it's reasonable to believe that it's better to keep us hooked on Xanax than it is to make us healthy. It's also interesting to note that there are now fewer manufacturers of these medications than there were 10 years ago. So more people are taking them, fewer people are making them, and so who's actually shareholders, doctors, the people that are benefiting it are everybody except the people that are taking it.
Well, and it's not even a conspiracy theory to say that the doctors do get kickbacks for prescribing certain brand names over the other. It's not called a kickback, but it's called something else. And basically, you get a prescription
referral bonus or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And legalized drug dealing is huge in Canada, right? People that are pharmaceutical salespeople make huge dollars. So, I mean, I think symptom management is the name of the game rather than actually curing people. That's certainly that doesn't even almost fall into conspiracy theory. This falls into observable fact.
Yeah.
No, I will.
On the charitable donations front, that's all about finding a cure.
Yeah.
People will pump money into that.
Sure. I will say I had an acute medical illness in the summer. I had my appendix removed, and there was no attempt to draw that out. My appendix was inflamed. I had surgery 36 hours later. I was discharged 24 hours after that. I was told if I wanted pain medication that I could come back and get a prescription for it, but it was a short course of antibiotics. So to be fair to everyone, it's not 100%. It's not a consistent thing. But I think especially when it comes to the mood altering drugs, it's a lot easier to keep somebody hooked long term than it is to solve the problem.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, mood altering drugs is a conspiracy all unto itself. I mean, look at all the people that have committed all kinds of heinous crimes across the world whilst on some sort of psychotropic medication of some sort that is prescribed to them.
Mass shooters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are two things every mass shooter has in common. One is an access to guns. The other is an access to medication.
Yeah. Or
they also seem to be affiliated with a certain political party, but that's maybe another show.
Yeah. Vast majority are registered Democrats. Yes,
we're on the wrong CPP for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can't get political. That's right.
Yeah. But no, I would say there certainly is a business model that is most likely, and that is it's not in their best interest to find a cure for something, but to keep us hooked on a thing that keeps us mostly well, but not 100%.
No, and of course it begs the question is if a supply interruption does happen, doesn't have to be the end of the world. You can imagine how many people are going to start going squirrely when their medication runs out / wears off and everything else. Because I mean, if that's the only thing preventing people from, acting crazy, that's not a good thing. Actually, I had a guy that was living in the Crown Land behind the house, fairly regularly a couple of years ago, and finally, he got to the point where he was actually coming onto the property and ended up having to get the police over because he wouldn't leave. And this guy was nuttier than squirrel turd. And anyways, what it boiled down to is they showed up. They knew him by name. They knew him by sight. Turns out his dad was actually an RCMP officer. And when they told him he had to go, he's like, "That's fine." I said, "So is he actually a concern? Should I be worried about this guy?" And they're like, "Oh, he's fine as long as he's on his medication." I'm like, "Well, how am I supposed to know that?"
So was Mr. Lee there in Saskatchewan. He was fine as long as he was on his medication, and when he wasn't, a dude lost his head.
Yeah, literally.
But it's okay because he's out back in the population now, and he's totally fine, so long as he's on his meds.
As long as he's on his meds,
and he promised he would stay on them. So that's what's important, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, how could that go wrong?
Yeah.
Until the voices tell him to stop taking the pills. And a squirrel moment. Ryan Reynolds, we all love him, but he actually did a very interesting movie. It's very dark, and it's a dark comedy kind of thing. It's called The Voices, and basically it's a movie that takes place from the perspective of the guy on the antipsychotic medication, and basically when he's on his medication, everything's bright and shiny and wonderful and everything else, and the severed heads into the fridge talk to him every morning and greet him good morning and everything else. And when he decides he has to start taking his pills again, he discovers the severed head in his fridge that isn't talking and is quite rotting, and he discovers all the animal poop in his apartment and the fact that it hasn't been cleaned in years and everything else. He doesn't like being off his on his medication, so he goes off it and everything goes bright and shiny again. And it's a very interesting take from
exact opposite of a beautiful mind. Then
exactly. So it was very interesting the fact that
what was that Kids in the Hall movie, Brain Candy?
Brain Candy, yeah.
That was a good one too.
Yeah, so like if you ever want an interesting perspective from the mind of a warped individual, that was for such a famous actor. He did one. It was only like 2 years ago. He did that movie.
Wow, I've never even heard of that. I will have to check it out.
Yeah, called The Voices, and it's got Anna Kendrick and Gemma Arterton and a couple other fairly big names in there.
How have I never heard of this?
Yeah, it was very like critically well received, but didn't get any sort of traction because it was dark.
I like those kind of movies, though. I mean, the darker they're better, really, in my opinion. Yeah. But I've got a pretty warped sense of humor.
Well, you'll like this one for sure.
Excellent.
I guess it brings me to my little pet one. Actually, we want to talk about yours, Gavin, too.
Yeah, if we got time, I can do that. I mean, I can run through the story. I think it ties in kind of to the whole 9/11 thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But some quick context for it. I know a bunch of guys down in Utah that I hang out with, and one of those guys, while sitting around a bonfire one evening, told me this story, and I have no reason not to believe him, because at the time he was kind of one of the bomb experts in the U.S. and was boots on the ground a few days after it happened. But the Oklahoma City bombing. So I guess there was an FBI agent that was stationed in a place called, I think it's Elohim City. I don't have any notes in front of me, so this is all off the top of my head. She kind of heard some rumors that there was some people looking for someone to plant a bomb and do some stuff. So she went to her bosses at the FBI, and they're like, this isn't really our bag. Go talk to the ATF. So she goes to talk to the ATF. They're like, okay, so we're going to have you now work for us. So she starts working with the ATF. So they start tailing McVeigh, and they're tracking him, and he goes to visit this guy and that guy and everything else, and they kind of start putting the story together of what he's going to do. And throughout this sort of process, I guess there's reports of him being seen with what appear to be Mexicans, because they're darker skinned fellows with giant mustaches.
That's racist.
Yes. But that's the description that everybody got.
Were they wearing sombreros as well? Is that how they knew
they may as well have been. But the official reports are that like there were people with, it was McVeigh and like 3 or 4 guys that appear to be Mexican. So, eventually it gets to the point where this is getting towards the day. So the ATF decides to basically burn the identity of this agent that brought this all to them. So they are now like on the run, like fleeing for their life, because they've totally been outed. McVeigh pulls the truck up in front of the building, and apparently him and these Mexican fellows, and for those that don't see it, I'm using the air quotes for Mexicans. I'll get back to that. Bomb goes off. It's an ANFO bomb, for those that know that kind of stuff, which is basically all bark and no bite. It's diesel fuel and fertilizer, so it's a lot of fireball, but not really a whole lot of concussive force in terms of explosive stuff. Half the building is leveled. Everybody, runs and panics and everything. But just prior to this, there's a bunch of phone calls that happen where people are asking why there is a bomb squad stationed a few blocks away. But in the panic ensuing shortly after the bombing, everybody heads in the direction towards where this bomb squad is stationed. So this particular bomb squad, which happens to be the ATF bomb squad, is not first on the scene. The local police department, who is also very close and happens to be located where the traffic didn't go, gets to the scene first and secures the scene and does all that. And if you watch and you can find some of the original footage, they actually pull some sort of a device out of the building on the half that's still standing.
So it didn't go off.
So that only aired on the live broadcast, and none of the other broadcasts after that even mention it. So
that's handy.
Yeah, and so McVeigh, takes off and heads out of there and happens to get pulled over by a police officer who is like 2 weeks from retirement for a seatbelt infraction and ends up getting thrown in jail for some reason for this. So the manhunt is on. They're looking for him everywhere. They can't find him. And then all of a sudden it comes up, holy crap, we've got the bomber in custody already.
That's convenient.
Yeah.
But then remember the movie SWAT where they got the international murderer on a broken taillight?
Yeah.
That was also Ted Bundy too. They got him on a broken taillight.
Yeah, they got a broken taillight.
But everybody's evacuating the city, and everyone's evacuating the city, and you pull a guy over for a seatbelt infraction.
And wasn't there a building evacuation order to certain members of certain offices? And
so that's what I was just going to say. So that's basically the gist of what happened. But here's some interesting facts. There was not a single ATF agent that was killed during this whole thing, despite the fact that they have offices that took an entire floor up. They were the ones investigating the case, and they had credible evidence that said this was happening prior to it happening. Okay. They also, instead of being the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which sounds like the coolest job ever, and were almost about to get shut down, all of a sudden became the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. So they gained new powers as a result of their involvement in this particular incident.
I'll counter that. Al Capone only went to jail for tax evasion.
Yes.
Right? So maybe they got him on a seatbelt violation. There are those air quotes again. Maybe they got him on a seatbelt violation, but maybe they knew what they were looking for, and the seatbelt violation is just what gave him the probable cause to pull him over.
With a cop 2 weeks from retirement.
Right?
Who's got nothing to lose.
So you've got... Yeah.
And he's guaranteed his nice pension.
Yeah, I'm gonna give them a pass on the seatbelt violation just because that's something they can use as probable cause to pull them over. I remember, I used to watch Cops when I was young, and they would know that the guy just left a drug house, but they would tail him until he ran a stop sign, pull him over because he ran a stop sign, and then find the drugs. Right, so you gotta take what you can to protect people's constitutional rights and still do your job.
And so this is the sort of last little interesting part of this thing, and this is the part that really threw me when I heard it at first. And I don't know if it's true. Like I said, I have no reason to believe my buddy is lying, and he worked for certain other 3-letter agencies. He did a lot of security work over in the Middle East and was stationed pretty high up. And he heard through the person that he was bodyguarding in the Middle East that the bombing was not actually McVeigh's idea, but Saddam Hussein sent a bunch of Iraqis to
Mexicans.
Yeah. And so that's where the whole Mexican thing is, dark-skinned and big mustaches. So
no sombreros. Okay.
No sombreros. Yeah. Sent them.
That's the big distinguisher. Yeah.
To Oklahoma to try and find who could do this and who they could kind of push to do this to make it look like it was homegrown. And the reason why he picked Oklahoma was because it's pretty much damn near in the middle of the United States. So he was literally striking at the heart of America. So that's
okay.
So one of those things where, again, it's there's some weird stuff that went on, and again, it's maybe not the government planning it, but it's maybe the government letting it happen in order to acquire new powers or enact new regulations and stuff like that. But that's an oldie, but a goodie in my books, if you will.
See, I knew those guys were trouble when they weren't eating chorizo tacos right off the bat. That'd be the
These
dead
Mexicans
giveaway.
were definitely not eating tamales. So
yeah, no bacon and eggers for them. So
no bueno, yeah.
Yeah, like you said, coolest job ever. Because you imagine they're sitting there, like, swirling cognac, smoking a cigar, and shooting a gun. Like, you know what would make this job even better? If we had a grenade to go with it.
Shit up.
Boom!
So we need to get that E in the title. How can we do this?
Yeah. But yeah, like it's one of those things that like a lot of people don't really talk about anymore because it happened so long ago, and like within days of the building blowing up, they collapsed the whole building. So like the evidence of it was not there for very long.
Well, you can't have anybody questioning the narrative. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but there's so many like weird little things that are just like, yeah, that doesn't sound right. Like, who pulls somebody over for a seatbelt infraction when like the entire city is evacuating? Like you've got to be like the biggest asshole cop in the world to do that to somebody at that time.
Right, but he's 2 weeks from retirement, so he's got to make his numbers now, or this won't happen.
Yeah.
Well, you got that monthly quota. They got to make that monthly quota before.
I gotta give him a pass on that. I really do. I give the cop a pass on that.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just weird.
Absolutely, that'd be weird.
It does raise a lot of interesting questions.
And even not to make light of the whole thing, because obviously there's loss of life, and it was quite a turning point there. But by the same token, though, it's like, if you're going to make it a little more realistic and you know what's going to come, now is the time to get rid of Frank, the guy in the office that you don't like, and say, hey, listen, ATF, we lost a couple guys too. Like Frank was left in the office there, and geez,
yeah, that guy you've been trying to fire for forever. Exactly, yeah.
It's like Milton off Office Space, right?
Yeah, or that guy that never gives you his slice of his birthday cake, right?
You could relocate him to sub-basement B, or you could just not tell him about the plan to not be in the building.
Well, yeah, like I mean, if they're already going to the lengths of like blowing up several hundred people, like I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's somewhere in the
168 people died.
Yeah. So you're already killing people. What's a couple more from your own agency to make it
more legit,
less like you had nothing to do with this? I mean,
yeah. It's.
I mean, if you're gonna be an evil bastard, be an evil bastard, right? Like, don't
be a really good evil bastard. Yeah.
Yeah. Not that we're teaching people how to do that kind of stuff on here.
I don't think we need to teach them how to do that. People who want to be evil bastards are going to be evil bastards, whether we ask them to or not.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think we need to talk about the next subject, which is atrazine, which is turning the frogs gay. So you guys have probably heard it in previous podcasts on Patriot Podcast, and even me mentioning this a couple of times during the water filtration chat, that you don't want to turn those frogs gay. So atrazine, to give you guys a bit of background for the listeners, is a pesticide that, herbicide or pesticide? Technically, it's a herbicide. It's used in corn and sorghum production, and it's basically used in the flyover states, like on a grossly larger proportion than the rest of the continental U.S. So basically, the Corn Belt, Iowa, and all that area, it's heavily used there. And the problem is, what they've run into is that this atrazine has been leaching into the water supply. Now, of course, they've linked it to fertility issues, causing certain types of cancer and hormonal changes in women. So, of course, they immediately started doing some lab testing after it had been released, and it turns out that it was causing some actually laboratory frogs to change genders arbitrarily, which I guess is a thing. If you watch Jurassic Park, it's a thing frogs do. So anyway, what the turning the frogs gay thing comes from is an Alex Jones quote, and if you guys can Google it if you're listening to the podcast, about Alex Jones's rant about how the frogs are turning gay and how the tap water is a gay bomb and everything else. I mean, as far as conspiracy theory goes, I don't think Alex Jones was way off. His delivery might have needed some work. So
yeah, a little bit. Although I think it was for Halloween, he did a whole episode where he dressed up as a gay frog.
So and clearly not very politically correct about the whole thing. So if you're going to try and prove a point, I mean, there's better ways to go around it. So I actually
population control.
Yeah, so I linked a Scientific American article, so I figured that is at least a little bit better than some of the other ones I found. So it turns out that this is a quote: "Is as of 2001, atrazine was the most commonly detected pesticide." So my mistake, it was a pesticide contaminating drinking water in the United States. So society suggested it's an endocrine disruptor, and it's an agent that can alter the natural hormonal system. It's been proven now to cause cancer, birth defects, and reproductive rate dropping, I guess. So is it safe to use for crops? Well, according to Big Ag, yes. That's debatable.
Big Ag, Big Pharma.
Yeah.
Right in tight together.
You know who else this ties into? That whole ethanol fuel nonsense, because it seems to be coming from the corn states.
Exactly.
Ooh,
and keep in mind, this is the same group of people that also told you that thalidomide and Agent Orange were good ideas at the time too. So, legitimately, I mean, would the world be able to produce as much food if they didn't use modern chemicals and fertilizers? Probably not. But by the same token, that obviously there's some bigger issues with atrazine being used in the States. So as far as the conspiracy theory goes, it is certainly causing some problems. We have had a noticeable drop in reproductive rates in North America in the last 30, 40 years. Yeah. So that's something we could maybe is correlation versus causation.
We've also had a significant increase in the availability of porn.
Yeah.
That's true too.
Correlation versus causation. Yeah. Here's a question: How is that particular pesticide applied?
Sprayed, but it's well, most of them are. They're just sprayed over top of the crops, and then basically just leaches in.
So, would it be safe to say that it is a trail by, say, crop dusting airplanes?
No. Actually, the reason you can't do that is you have to wait till there's no wind to apply this stuff, and you have to actually use like a low-level sprayer, because if you don't, being capitalists, they don't want to waste extra atrazine because it costs money. So they have to actually distribute it as most efficiently as possible.
Yeah, I mean, to get the most number of gay people.
That's right.
Apply it sparingly in the right places. Yeah.
That's right. And clearly they don't like those flyover states very much, because that's where they're using most of it. So,
so this isn't something that they would just load into airplanes and drop over major cities as chemtrails.
No, see, that's another whole episode we could talk about.
Yeah. No, it's not the east coast of Canada where they were testing like DEET and everything else, and all kinds of other stuff where they just are like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. We don't like these people.
they're just Nova Scotians, whatever. It's fine.
Yeah, and honestly, actually, not a lot of conspiracy theory was declassified and proven true that back in the 1950s, the U.S. military intentionally sprayed the city of Winnipeg with a relatively benign biological agent that caused like flu-like symptoms, just so they could test spreading rates between people, so they could see how long it would take for a city to poison itself with the biological agent. So it was very interesting, because so basically the entire city of Winnipeg got the flu one time in the 50s, and nobody thought much of it at the time. But at the time, it turns out it was the U.S. just experimenting.
The problem is, though, is that like from all the first aid training and stuff I've done, basically the symptoms of the flu are the symptoms of everything.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you're sweaty.
Also the symptoms of a heart attack. Also the symptoms of major shock.
Yeah, stroke, everything. So it's like, oh, yeah, you're just gonna die. I think. I don't know. Or it could be nothing. Or it could be nothing.
Or it could be better.
It could be absolutely nothing.
Yeah. It could just need water.
I think I'll save.
This is also why telehealth in Ontario is completely useless.
Yeah.
Well, they don't want to waste their proper nurses' time. Come on now, you're just a wage slave, or a tax slave. So anyway, I think we'll leave fluoride for another night. But
fluoride and chemtrails. Is fluoride used in chemtrails? That's a good question. Tie those together.
Don't be silly. It's atrazine. Come on now.
It's atrazine.
I don't know.
Anywho, back to serious business. Yeah. Here's this week's podcast challenge. I'm gonna stand up a big one, especially because it's still winter. Learn or practice 4 different ways of making fire. Conventional methods: use a match or a lighter. I hope everybody that's listening to this podcast can do that. Make a fire effectively. Next step: use a ferro rod. So a different method that doesn't use a flame but uses a spark. Then add a friction fire, such as a bow drill or a plow, something like that, and then use the sun. And that actually ties us into an email we'll get to in a little bit in a moment. But find 4 different ways of making a fire, 4 different sources of heat to ignite your tinder and make a fire. And that is my challenge to everyone this week.
I'll give you guys a good one in case nobody knows. Steel wool and a 9-volt battery.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great one.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the ways. But practice it and make sure that you can actually not just create a spark, but actually create a flame.
Yeah.
Put your kindling on top of that, put your fuel on top of that, and actually make a fire to keep yourself warm. Practice that a few different ways. That's your challenge for this week.
I mean, Vaseline and cotton balls. Vaseline and cotton balls works good too, but I don't want to know if any single guys have that collection in their personal property. I don't want to know why, but
I don't want a Vaseline for somebody who never uses Vaseline.
So, shout outs. Gavin, I think I asked you before, any shout outs?
No, I don't like people.
Oh, that's fair. For myself, actually, I got a message on YouTube from a guy named Rye. He's a local prepper. He made a YouTube comment for me. He's asking exactly where I am. Like, from an ops perspective, I'm not going to give him a lat and long, although I almost did the other day when I was actually showing the iPhone with the lat and long.
You dropped the pin by accident?
Yeah, like it almost actually showed. I was like, oh no. So the traveling prepper actually said, dude, you almost gave away your lat and long like perfectly on camera. I'm like, oh yeah, I almost did. But anyway, so I'm definitely mid-island. So if you're anywhere near there, it's and if you're a local guy, you know what that means. And it's definitely away from major centers.
Yeah, if you don't, stay the hell away.
Yeah, exactly. But for sure, in the contact info later on, Rye, just drop me an email. And if you're local, for sure, let's see if we can meet up. And yourself, Alan.
I will give a shout out to my aforementioned scout leader, Scouter Jeff. He was an RCR guy. I can't even count how many years ago that was. I'm such an old man now. But anyways, when I was in Scouts, he taught me to keep my head on a swivel, be prepared for the worst, and told me that the right knot in the figure 8 family will get you just about anything that you need done. So Scouter Jeff, if you happen to be listening, I have never forgotten.
Sounds good. So no iTunes reviews this week. We did get 2 listener emails. Gavin, you want to take the first one?
I certainly do. This one is from Kevin. The subject is Ian's EDC for the road kit. I don't think Ian mentioned a magnifying glass. If he did, then I missed it. Buy the Fresnel lens one from Amazon. They are dirt cheap, and if you have to pull a splinter, they will help you see it. Man, I've had to do that far too many times. They are backup fire starter, or if you lose your reading glasses, they are great there too. I carry one in my wallet as EDC as well. There's one on my back bug out bag. First aid kit? Fact, yep. Yes. There you go. Love those TLAs.
What's a TLA?
3-letter acronym.
Oh, okay, fair enough. First of all, I went full autiste, and so Alan and I were discussing it. It actually turns out it's pronounced Fresnel lens, and because there's a city of Quesnel in British Columbia, and I figured it had to rhyme with that. And we actually had to go to the dictionary for that one.
The Oxford English Dictionary pronounces it as Fresnel. I'm not one to them.
There you go. So the magnifying glass. No, I don't have one in my kit at all. But interestingly enough, if you can buy one and they're flat and light, then they work great. But I wonder if it actually would start a fire using the sun, if that would be enough. Like, you know, the old glass magnifying glasses from dollar store work great, but I don't know if one of those would work. You guys ever use one?
There's only way to find out. Practice.
Yeah, I've only ever used the old school glass ones back in the day, like in school when I was being, a punk kid.
Well, burning ants and stuff like that. Doing kid stuff.
My Vaseline soaked cotton balls. That's Vaseline cotton ball. Fresnel ones will get you just about anywhere.
Yeah, it's a good Friday night.
With the Fresnel lens or the cotton balls?
Whatever.
No, the Vaseline.
One then the other.
Yeah, I don't judge.
That's how you end up on like watch lists and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, I think
if you're not on a watch list by now.
Yeah, I think if we mentioned Oklahoma City 9/11 and atrazine in the same podcast, we're on a watch list.
Another listener email. This is from Mike. Mike says, "Hey guys, I've been enjoying the show. Had some questions for you. Question 1, I heard in one of your episodes that you sell some of your chicken meat. What are the legalities of selling the meat? Do you need to have it butchered by a certified butcher?" Ian, I think that was you, wasn't it? That was talking about that?
Yep. So that varies province by province, but in the province of British Columbia, the way it works is there's 2 ways you can go about it. You don't have to be actually like have farm
legally
status.
or illegally. That's
no, they're both legal. Now, come on. I would never recommend anybody break the law on camera. That's for sure. I said on camera. Anyway, so yeah, there's 2 ways to do it in BC, and basically, if you get it commercially processed by a BC provincially certified or chicken or even I guess abattoir of any sort, and it's been commercially processed, and you can prove that it has been just by one of their labels on the meat or whatever in the package, then you can actually sell it over the fence without farm status to anybody for up to a certain amount. If you exceed a certain dollar amount, basically the government's going to want you to become a farm status kind of farm, but up to a certain amount, you're fine.
But they want your tax dollars.
Yeah, because they want your tax dollars. And basically the threshold, depending on what you're doing in BC, the threshold is around $2,000 to $2,500 a year. Like, for example, eggs over the fence, they don't care a thing about because there's no packaging required on your part. The chicken does the packaging for you. So it's considered to be a perfectly safe food to sell without any sort of commercial intervention. However, there is a workaround with chicken meat in BC is the fact that if you do not commercially process it and you want to do it yourself, which I have to admit, if you do it correctly at your own house, I have more faith in your own personal system than a commercial system that is run by people making minimum wage. But you can sell meat over the fence as long as you clearly mark it, not for human consumption, meaning you're selling it for dog food or you're selling it for whatever have you. Just to say the words "not for human consumption," give it to the other person, sell it, and what they do with it is their business. But you've made your point. So. Yep. And a lot of people do sell that as dog food. Like if you have a spent hen that's old or a rooster that's more than a year old, just like a hog that becomes over a year old, the boars get a taint to the meat. You don't want to sell them for human consumption anyway, so why commercially process them?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then Mike's second question. I moved into a new house last year. Although having 2 ways to heat the house was on my wish list, it was overruled when my wife saw our current place. What are the best ways to add a second way to heat your house? Biggest concern is losing power, not being able to run the furnace. Thanks for a great show. Signed, Mike. Well, Mike, there are as many options as you want for that. Probably the most basic way is to add a gas insert fireplace. That's going to add value to your home, secondary heat source, doesn't require power, and even your wife will enjoy that. It makes for more romantic evenings. Most homeowners can get on board with that. Natural gas lines rarely get shut down like the power grid does. And if it doesn't need a power vent, if you install a system that doesn't need a power vent, then you don't require any power at all to keep that gas fireplace running. If that's not enough, my next go-to would be to consider a portable wood stove with a knockdown chimney. Vent that out a window if you floor it. Just seal up the window so you're not letting in cold air, and you have as much fuel as you can stack in your woodshed. It doesn't take up a lot of space when it's tucked away, and is usable for more things than just heating your home. Take that camping with you. Take that to the hunt camp. Take that wherever you want to be, out in the cold garage. I know I have a wood stone garage that would keep me warm out there. Unfortunately, mine's too big to move into the house, but it would be a good secondary source. If you really want to go full bore on that, then install a generator with a power transfer switch that just runs your furnace. It just runs the power vent. It won't take a huge amount of draw, and that could keep you going. You can even get generators that have a natural gas supply or a large propane tank. That'll keep your house warm and toasty for as much time as you have fuel for.
Yeah,
those are a few options.
You can get an oil furnace as well.
Yep.
The hunt camp that I go to has one of those, and let me tell you, man, I've been out there in the winter when it's like -20, -30, and it's got a wood burning stove that you can, like one of those old school Pioneer ones that when we get there, we light it because that gives us sort of instant heat. But it's the oil furnace that really heats that place. And I mean, it gets so hot that even on low, that you got to open the windows at night because you start sweating. And I mean, they're great. Yeah, pellet stoves are also great.
But pellet stoves require power.
Yes, but if you have a generator, they require very little power.
That's true. If you get a variable speed, like an inverter generator that actually winds down with less draw, that's even better.
Well, that and to go with that generator, because I have a little bit of knowledge on this stuff because I sell them. There is actually a thing that you can buy that's a little bit of it's a transfer switch, but like you don't have to go and get an electrician to wire it in your panel. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money, but it actually installs behind your meter.
Oh,
and so
interesting.
So apparently, at least in Ontario, once a year, you're allowed to call your government-sponsored electricity provider, and they will come and shut off your power for free and allow you to remove the meter. And then you can place this thing behind it. And as far as I know, because we've looked at selling them, we just haven't brought them in yet. You pull off the face of the meter, and this thing slides in behind it. Then you put your meter back on, and you seal it up. And it gives you a little plug that you can plug your generator into. And it stops the power from feeding back into the grid if all of a sudden the power comes on. So it's not an automatic. Yeah, it's not an automatic switch on when your power goes out. But you can get your 2,000-3,000 watt generator or whatever you've got when the power goes out. Flick off all the circuits to the stuff that you don't want to run, that's non-essential. Plug in your generator, fire it up, and power the stuff in your home as an alternative to the sort of more costly, although better, sub panel with all the stuff you want to run and this, and like a natural gas or propane generator that'll kick on.
That's certainly another interesting option.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool things to provide power and heat in an emergency.
Well, and if you want to make it on the cheap a little bit too, so you guys were talking about having a wood stove in place in the house, like so. Princess Auto, everybody's got a good Princess Auto nearby. I think when they go on sale, they're like $99 for those like little four-legged wood stoves.
Yeah.
You can get one of those for $99. It's probably big enough to heat a couple rooms in the house, so everybody just kind of piles into the two rooms if need be, if it's really cold out. I think you'd have to do a fair amount of prep work for like a window insert to make sure that. Because I think that's probably the biggest hazard to running one of those is making sure that you have either like an asbestos or fireproof or whatever window plug that you can run one of those stove pipes through. But if you have that set up ahead of time, then you just basically pop out open the window, plug in the plug itself, start the fire, and then that, like Alan was saying, that's unlimited heat supply if you have a fair amount of wood nearby.
Yeah. I mean, they've got the big wood processors too that you can. I mean, you mount them, outside your house. And I mean, you're throwing like full-size logs and stuff in there, and those are pretty good too. So I mean, there's lots of options that.
Yeah, I think that. Well, that Princess O one's like $99 or something when it's on sale, right here.
And it doesn't. Yeah. And it doesn't have to live in the family room. You can knock it down and take it into the basement. It's light enough that with a little bit of effort that you can hide it out of the way until it's needed. But if you've planned for that ahead of time, then you've got a secondary heat source that requires nothing but the wood that's already around, and if you've got a couple of cords there for your campfires, then a couple of extra cords becomes your secondary heat source if the power goes out long term.
Yeah, the ones I'm talking about though are like big permanent, like outside the house units, like But like I mean, they exist, so like I mean that's an option. Like if you want something more permanent and you've got the money, they're great because they will do a better job than the portable unit. But the portable units are, again, like it's an emergency, so you spend $100 or whatever. Yeah.
Cheap, fast, and easy.
Well,
so it depends on what your wife will let you get away with, I guess, is the short answer in the end of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, also, if you have any questions, consult with an expert, like a fireplace guy. Maybe not a fireplace, but consult with a heating and air conditioning guy to make sure that you have proper clearances and everything else. And even like something as simple as a candle can cause problems. When we had the big power outage a few weeks ago in my neck of the woods, literally we're standing and staring across the beam. We're watching a house burn down, and it turned out it was just two kids with the parents watching them. using the little tea light candles. They slipped off, started a fire, house burned down to the ground. And because the fire trucks just couldn't get to them. That's all it boiled down to. So it doesn't take much for things to fall astray. So gas supply, you mentioned that, Alan. But natural gas, I think it's under about 4 inches of water column for pressure. And from what I was told, with the accumulators in the neighborhoods and stuff that have like a gas PSI accumulator, you've got about a 3-week supply. So if the power goes out, isn't coming back, you got about three weeks or so, depending on how many people are using it, before the supply runs out.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about. And then the military stoves. So, like, you guys remember those? They look like the miniature lighthouses or whatever, but they're like a military stove that run on diesel fuel or gas or like any kind of fuel you can find.
Yep.
And they have like a circular wick to them. A friend of mine has one, and I can't remember what they're actually called, but they're like a military issue thing. You can find one of those, and again, they burn with enough a low oxygen use so you can actually use it indoors fairly safely, and the military does. And maybe life's cheaper. I don't know with the military.
Then I mean, if you are going to be running generators, don't run them inside.
No, exactly. Please.
I can't tell you how many people have asked when I've been working trade shows. So I can put this inside? No. Don't put your barbecue inside. Like, don't do stupid things like that.
And here's what comes down to: before you put anything that burns fuel in your house, have a working CO detector on every floor. It's just a good idea. Let's take the fact that it's the law out of the equation. It's just a good idea.
And battery
laws
powered.
Be damned.
Not hardwired to your house either for the house power. It has to be a battery powered CO detector.
Battery powered because we're preparing for the worst, and we're preparing to heat our home when the power is out. You still need to know if things are getting bad. So have a good CO detector. Don't skimp on that. Spend the money on that before you deal with anything involving heating your house with a secondary source.
And then my last one, I was going to put a big star behind my last one because you still have to crack a window, but there are small catalytic propane powered heaters. These like 1 pound propane bottles. They don't actually have an active flame. I guess there technically is one on a microscopic level, but basically they have very little carbon dioxide being let off. And basically, they say as long as you crack a window, you can kind of use one of these indoors. But of course, that also defeats the purpose. You're not going to have as efficient of a heating system. But propane catalytic heaters are an option, with the caveat that you do have to crack a window or at least have airflow, like maybe a leaky house would do. But
have definitely used those propane heaters on the range in winter.
Oh sure, so have I. I have one in my garage. It's it's a little buddy, so it only takes 1 cylinder. The bigger one will run 2 cylinders simultaneously. You can actually get an adapter for those that'll actually run off a 20-pound tank, which is kind of cool as well. But it's certainly you definitely need some airflow because it is letting off carbon monoxide. But it will certainly do the job in a pinch. It's a room size heater though. It's not a house size heater.
No, I don't think any of our solutions really are, because I mean, even with a decent fireplace indoors, you're only going to heat a couple of rooms, and at that point, if it's a long-term thing, you're probably going to want to pile everybody into the same room anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then seal off that room with like wool blankets or something on the doors or whatever.
Tarps, blankets. Keep the airflow to a minimum so that you've got you're only heating the smallest area possible.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess that's it. Anything else, guys?
I think that's everything on my list.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess with that, we're going to bring episode 14 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. Where can people find the show?
You can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or your podcast app. Please take a few minutes and submit a review. It helps other people to find us, helps us know what we're doing well, what we need to improve on. You can also find us at theprepperpodcast.ca. Our YouTube live shows are now available. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Island Retreat. Click the notifications tab. That will give you a alert when we're going live. You can find me personally on Instagram at PPSWO.
All right. If you want to contact Ian directly, you can reach me at theislandretreat@gmail.com. I'd love to answer questions specific to Western Canada, and I welcome any questions from new preppers. You can also find me occasionally giving my 2 cents worth on Canadian Patriot Podcast, which I'm sure will be expanded upon by Gavin here in a moment. And they're available on iTunes and YouTube.
Yeah, you can find me on the Instagrams as well, urbex_GTA, or like Ian said, Canadian Patriot Podcast. We do a live show on Monday evenings. We get a little bit spicier than this one, but sometimes we cover some prepping stuff too. You can also find me at Ragnarok Tactical as well.
And even though Eric is out of country, he's stuck in Gitmo. If you could check out his website as well, rapidsurvival.com. Help bail him out. Check out his prepper gear there. Shoot him an email at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca or hit him up on the live chat at rapidsurvival.com. If he's raised there, will help him pay for his early release.
All right. Well, I guess thanks for joining us, and tune in for the next episode. We're going to talk about EMP.
Oh, wait, we didn't come up with that. We didn't come up with the next episode, guys.
No?
Oh, we fell apart. Well, you said it. You said it.
EMP? All right.
We're going to go with EMP then.
Well, EMP, and then spring planting of food crops and spring stores for prepping.
We had a bunch of choices to choose from.
So that's like 7 episodes right there.
And we got caught with our pants down. So, so it's EMP. That's what it is.
All right,
we're
there you
supposed
go.
to wear pants?
Just don't stand up.
No, never.
That's how I roll. EMP
all right,
it is.
EMPs. All right.
Yeah.
Next.
Unless we get hit by one, until next time, be prepared, stay safe, and
keep learning.